Invisible Experts Podcast.
Welcome everyone to this new episode of the Invisible Experts Podcast. There is a lot of excitement around AI right now. We hear that it's transforming industries, boosting productivity, and potentially adding trillions of dollars to the global economy over the next decade, right? But there is a question we don't ask often enough: who is actually benefiting from it and from this transformation, and who is being left behind? Because the reality is that access to AI is not yet evenly distributed. Actually, around 2.6 billion people still don't have access to the internet, and many more lack the skills, infrastructure, or even resources needed to use digital technologies effectively. In some regions, less than 20% of the population is actively using advanced digital tools, while in others, AI is already deeply embedded in the everyday work and decision making of their lives. So while AI is often described as such a global revolution, the starting point is very different depending on where you are or where you are from. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. I'm really pleased to be joined by my good friend, brother Yash Ranga, a dear friend of mine and someone who has been working for years at the intersection of innovation, partnerships, and global development. Josh is currently Director of Partnership and Innovation at Pyxera Global, and he brings a perspective that, from my perspective, goes beyond theory, grounded in real work with communities, organizations, and systems across different parts of the world. He also joined us earlier in this podcast in episode 3. So it's great to have him back for this conversation. Today, we are going to move beyond the hype and look at the realities of AI adoption across different contexts: rural versus urban, global north versus global south, and explore what actually takes to make these technologies accessible, meaningful somehow, and inclusive. Yash, it's great to have you back, man. Welcome, my brother.
Gracias, Andres. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I can't thank you enough for creating this such a rich space for the world of practitioners to get inspired, to get connected, to learn, and to co-create in a world where we needs more cooperation. So, heads off to your leadership, man. Cheers.
Thank you, bro. So, Yash, to start a little bit, can you tell us about your journey and how you came to work at the intersection of technology development and global communities?
Sure, man. As everybody's journey starts with, like life purposes, questions on who we are. I think my journey also started with this work that I'm doing now at the intersection of technology, communities, innovations, partnership, was a very, very simple question. What I saw as the reality of world when I see some communities have access to opportunity while the other remains invisible in the system of investments, innovation, and power. And I think over the years, working in the social impact space, climate resilience, livelihoods, youth engagement, circular innovations, I realized that technology is never about technology. It is all about who gets included in future. Again, like as a software engineer, I never thought what I'm doing today I'll be doing what I was being taught in my academics. But I really believe that the technology is about who is included in future, and I think especially AI gave us that lens to think about innovation and technology in a way that the inclusion has kind of become an exclusion has kind of become an industrial commodity. So how do you really move from that has been my quest, my journey to bring reality of humanity at the surface in action at the front line with voice, with leadership, with collaboration, and most importantly, with impact. So that's been my journey, and I work now at Pyxera Global at the intersection of partnerships, innovation, community systems. It might sound a lot, but in simplistic terms, what it means is how do you bring together corporations, governments, philanthropy, entrepreneur, and grassroots communities to solve the most pressing problems of humanity that no single institution, no matter how powerful, no matter how naive, can solve it in silos or by themselves. So that's the beauty of how we bring together. And what shaped my perspective is very important. When I travel for work, for engagements, I see two different perspectives and reality existing in the same time. When I'm in Silicon Valley or in New York, I really talk about and see about people talking about how AI is disrupting the face of humanity or how AI is transforming humanity. And when I come back on ground, in reality, in action, I see communities are still struggling with the biases of digital access, on basics of digital access, market visibility, and most important, now in this world of conflict, trust in their own systems. This contrast of the world boggles my mind and really makes me think every day, every night, what is innovation? And my focus now is how do I bring in a shift in my thought process, in my action, is that it's just not only innovation, but the question is innovation from whom? And that's what brings me here in this conversation today. Whom at the nexus of AI, technology, innovation, and so-called, this whole global perspective around transforming humanity, but forgetting the foundation of what are we talking about? As you said, 1 in 4 people don't even have access to internet, or in small, medium, I would say, emerging economies, 5 GB of data costs them 25% of their monthly salary. What are we talking about? Yeah.
That's crazy, man. And that actually like brings me to the next question, which is like you have worked across very different contexts. And I think it's very fortunate from your experience, like having this kind of global overview, global organizations, local communities, different regions. So, what has that taught you about how technology actually impacts people's lives?
You know what I have, as I said, technology is not about only technology. So what I believe the impact is the role of technology. The technology's role is to amplify existing systems, not human beings. And it's the responsibility of the design of the system to define the scope of the role of technology on the lives of communities, peoples, organization. So I always say, if systems are inclusive, technology can accelerate opportunities. And we all see a lot of opportunities being created due to technological advancement. But if systems are unequal, technology also accelerates inequality that we are all facing in today's time of conflict, climate crisis, as well as cultural crisis. So I have always seen tools that really transforms livelihoods or the opportunities for livelihoods. Just to give you an example, just from very, very local context, how has technology improved farmers' market to access? The um, uh, most difficult element for farmers to how to take their produce, reducing the post-harvest loss to the market. Technology has enabled that. And that has really infused millions of dollars in those economies. Again, you look at how youth has gained employability. How were we when we didn't even have this whole technological playground in the world we live when we were growing up? But now see how youngsters, even like 5 year, 6 year old, are building their skills through technology, and they're employable at much younger age than you and me were. And that how communities connect to financial systems. You talk about India, You don't need cash anymore. You are just transacting just through your phones anywhere, informal, unlike unhomed person. Everybody has a phone and you can use UPI to transact. That's the impact, really deepened impact in the lives of a common man. Like being a technologist myself as trained, but I also believe that it has the other side also. But if the systems are unequal, you see in Africa, you see how even till date, such a capable, potent continent only has less than 40% access to internet. So I'm just talking about a country like India and a continent like Africa. And I also seen that technology fail because solutions were designed or are designed for communities, not with communities. So again, like I always say that it is just like a situation where you put someone in a library with books which are not in their language, what they would do with that. So I always think that the biggest lesson that I get, people do not adopt technology because it is cool, it is advanced. They adopt it because it solves the real-time problem in a way that respect their local realities. And again, we are talking about AI, a brilliant AI solution, no matter how cool, is it worth if it's not accessible, like there is no internet access? Is it worth if there is no language accessibility? Is it worth if does not includes the data of local people or the voices of the local people? Or maybe the commitments also, the communities don't trust the institution behind this technology because it's still very skewed and centered at the global north side. So I think for me, it's a beauty, as I said, to see the contrast on both the sides, and job of people like us is to how do you bridge the gap of this contrast in bringing more community voice at the design itself. And just one more point I would like to add is that the future of the technology would not be decided in Silicon Valley or the global capitals. Mark my words, we will see that in next 15 to 10 years. It will be decided in villages, informal economies, underserved neighborhoods, urban neighborhoods, and first-time digital users. You will see that. And I'm really seeing the shift in action of new age entrepreneurs in this space.
That's great, man. Can you elaborate a little bit about it? Because I think this is a great point what you're saying. Because it seems like in the global sphere that the technology or the creation of it is, let's say, produced and owned by few people, right? Few hands. But the way that you put it is like you are very confident it'll be more democratized, if you wish. It'll be more collective and people will have more access to it, not only for using it, but also for producing it and design. Yeah, is it that what you say? So can you elaborate why is that coming from?
So you know what? We have all seen a lot of dot-com burst, a lot of bubbles around, technology burst when it initially came. And the only reason was the design was not inclusive, not equitable, but like design was more reserved for kind of elite as compared to others because of access to education or access to technology. What I think with the growing medium class population or more mid-range earning people, they are kind of widening the horizon, and they entering into the world of entrepreneurship, innovation, coming from, a fine balance of both of seeing the dark side of it, but also seeing the fun side of it from the global north. So I think this access to education piece of technology is what bringing the more inclusion in future. And that's why I said that I see that the future of the technology, the AI is not from anymore being, I would say, controlled from Silicon Valleys or some global capitals, but it would kind of, be a bottom-up growth from emerging economies, from rural communities, because still what we talk about is that more than two-thirds of the world population is offline. Imagine the power the moment those people come online. Where do you get that wisdom from? What they need? So I think that's the journey that we should be focusing on to really make AI revolution work in a more responsible way. I would say that.
I was wondering, man, like, I don't know if you ever heard or read the Frankenstein, this kind of
Mhm.
like, alter ego robotic figure, right? That could symbolize uncontrolled technology, this kind of scientific hubris, industrial modernity, you know? So I was wondering whether, this kind of, as you said, and I like that, when you say about technology, it's not only technology, it could be something else, right? So, from your experience and perspective, do you think technology has developed because it's perhaps maybe money driven or perhaps innovation driven or more like community driven? Or do you think it's a collection of the three of them?
I would say it's a collection of all three of them because again, like any sector is not created in silos, no matter how capitalistic it can be, no matter how inclusive or equitable it can be. It does not get its design from silos. So it has elements of both, all. And you see the gravity depends from three things. One, intent. Second, leadership. And third, enabling environment. And we
Hmm.
saw how technology took its roots coming from Silicon Valley and then kind of spreading all across the world now, is there was intent, there was leadership, and there was enabling environment and in that piece of the world. And the world saw the power of these three in form of the fastest, newest, youngest sector as technology industry to become such an integral part of our life and everybody's life, I would say. So we are using like even like common people is using technology even without really knowing what it is, but they are part of it. Like, in India, I told you people are using UPI and they are not, I would say, digital illiterate, but they know because it has become part of their life. So that's why I say it's combination of all. Definitely it had an financial influence because again, it was cool, it was young, it was innovative, it was giving you that like adrenaline rush to create. And that's why it's a blend of all of them, and we cannot kind of put one over the other. I always say that how do you balance the gravity of each? That's what makes it more inclusive and sustainable in long terms, and also
Yeah,
accept.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's it. Very interesting what we just like talking about because if you think about it, technology could be considered as human projection. We want to project something onto something else, right? And I was wondering, like how come AI or technology itself is going to transform the world, but not everyone is starting from the same place.
Mhm.
So what really want you to share about is like from your perspective, what does this digital divide really mean today?
Beautiful question. I really like it. And I've been thinking about it a lot. Is just access to internet what's considered as digital divide? But I think in my definition of digital divide today is not only about internet access. If we have been able to get at least a third of population getting access to internet, we have done some beautiful work to really complement the efforts globally gone in to get people access, and then after access, making it more like financially accessible. So for me, it's more about becoming an intelligence divide because, in the world of AI, it's not about, we all know there exists a technology, but do we have the intelligence to use that technology for good? Do we have the skill sets? Do we have the enabling environment? I always say that the way we made in many countries and in any system fundamental foundational literacy, there has to be a fundamental foundational AI literacy for everyone on this planet. That's when you can really kind of bridge this digital divide gap. Otherwise, it'll keep on widening because you don't know how to be part of it. And you don't know, for me, the real divide is when I don't know who shapes my AI. I have no idea who controls my data, who benefits economically. It's only the few corporations or the upper part of pyramid is economically benefiting, or it is really impacting my life on day-to-day basis. And then most importantly, who gets represented in those systems? These are all elements and criteria of real digital divide for me. And then who becomes invisible? That's really kind of a dangerous space where, because see, AI is as good as the source of intelligence. And if the source of intelligence of AI is not well fed, then the content, the output that will come would be not well fed and well represented. So for me, that is really kind of the basis for digital divide. And I also say that we are entering in a world where AI influences our education, our healthcare, our finances, our governance, our employment, and most important, never forget about it, our public narratives. They are all now designed on AI. But if we the communities are excluded from all the digital design of this digital ecosystem today, the risk of being excluded from the future economy or economic systems is entirely like visible. We are saying that if we lose X amount of jobs or X types of jobs because we are not finding a way to alternately create those spaces to keep those jobs relevant. Because every job on this planet is relevant. It's our job. How to keep it relevant and in what context. So I think it's not a technology issue, it's a development issue. For me, it's a hardcore developmental subject. It's a workforce issue. How do you develop the workforce? As I said, you have to have a universal digital AI literacy module for everyone. And then again, in this world of conflict, it's a democracy issue because how we design the public narrative using AI for me is mind-boggling. And lastly, which kind of keeps me awake at night, my friend, is increasingly risk of human dignity issue. Like how do we consider human beings as human beings on just basis of access to some resources or some technology are important, and then the people who are not represented are completely non-existent, as what I said, who are invisible from the ecosystem. So for me, like this is a very classical issue of workforce democracy, and most importantly, a developmental issue that can be solved through collaboration or can be strengthened through collaboration, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting, man. Especially because you have been exposed in this kind of environment that you have to deal with the corporate world, the government world, the communities, and then uh, I would say you are in between. You are kind of like a mediator in between these dimensions. But also, like, if you think about it, you also work everywhere. You work in developed countries, in developing countries, in countries like are innovating and in different contexts. So I was thinking,
Mhm.
how does how does this digital divide appears or show up, or perhaps is displayed in between, let's say, global north, global south, urban, rural, because it could be evident. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Like for me, it's a very crystal clear waterfall model. In technology, we talk about waterfall model. And I exactly see it like that because the global north is largely building AI. And all the investments, everything, 90% of the global AI investment still sits in global north. And how is global south perceived? It's perceived as becoming a testing ground for the consequences of AI, not integration of how you work with them, but how do you see the consequences before you put it to test in your own system. And most important, the AI infrastructure, investment, computing power, data ownership are still concentrated in handful of countries, corporations, and even the legislation policy around it is like super thin and very limited for limited interests. So that's my kind of visualization of how it sits between global north and global south. But again, I must say that what we are really missing is the population that sits in global south.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, many communities in global south are dealing with low digital literacy, fragmented infrastructure, weak policy system in global south, and how are we kind of creating a synergistic platform that integrates the interests. I'm sure every part has its own interest on that. So how do we, and I think that's what we really do well at Pyxera Global, is that how do you bridge the gap, aligning the interest of different sectors and different players. So and really interesting program that we kind of co-created and designed with our learning, working with corporations, government, communities, philanthropists, is that we designed a program called AI for Impact. And it's a very
Okay.
simple program of how do you introduce the global north AI design architect minds to the real world problems. So what we do is we bring them on ground in reality, all virtual right now, with the NGOs who are trying to fix, their growth areas in climate, in healthcare. And then how can these great minds who have access to the world-class infrastructure, education, ecosystem can work on real life problems that are also of business interest to these corporations. So again, this is a very beautiful way of creating a synergy that keeps the interest of different stakeholders aligned, but constructively co-create and also make the global north, or say the more influential or more, I would say, advanced players, to kind of get an opportunity to collaborate with the future of opportunities coming from rural communities, global south, all of that part of that world. So I think for me, this is a way of how do you bridge the gap. As you said, the role that we play of how do you bridge the gap with different stakeholders is something really, really exciting. But again, what I am really worried is just not only about global south or global north, but again, like how you train AI for within global south, urban and rural.
Hmm.
How does people are kind of hooked up in consciously or subconscious ways to digital tools that are AI enabled, but when you go to rural, you see them completely excluded because there is no language access to them. And if that AI only absorbs English, imagine what is it's missing when it really kind of bring that overall, like overall intelligence of the AI. So I think that's the kind of ways where we think about different players, different sectors, and more importantly, different positioning of global now, global south. But what I call them as emerged economies, emerging economies, and really like economies that have done really well. So what we can learn from those economies and how can we create opportunities for them, because everybody understands partnership in a way that impacts them in profits, impact them in impact. And if we kind of bridge the gap between profits and impact, that's what makes it more robust, I guess.
So the big question would be, um, what would be the biggest gap? Like about access to technology, or do you think is it more about skills, knowledge,
Mhm.
and the ability to use it effectively.
I would say it's not one over the other because access matters the most, but I think capability matters more than most. Because if you have access and you don't have capability, is as good as I said, sitting in a library with a different language than you don't speak in that. So I think for me, capability is super critical to make AI more responsible, and giving someone kind of AI tools without digital literacy is kind of a ticking time bomb as well, you know. So for me, the next phase of inequality that would come out of this access versus capability factors is most important, that who has internet, or it'll be who knows how to work with the internet of AI, or who can participate in digital economies. So I would say when it comes to capability matters, AI literacy is the most important investments that needs to be made for a long-term, more integrated impact on also emerging economies, but also it ripples to emerge economies, because markets are interconnected now. They are not operating in silos, and they cannot operate in
Hmm.
silos.
And actually, if you think about it, like maybe establishing or developing infrastructure for AI or for technology, I think it would be easier than actually develop skills and capability from the society to deal with it. So I agree. I think
Absolutely.
although they are interconnected, we need to look into what is the future for the children who are coming up, for the present people who are coming up, in terms of how can they actually live with technology, create technology, and design technology. Yeah. But
I
nowadays,
always say that you cannot export innovation without importing empathy. So I think, like that's where we sit at this intersection of innovation and empathy, that makes it more reliable and relevant. Otherwise, it becomes obsolete, no matter how cool it is.
yeah, 100%. So you mentioned about this AI for impact, and also
Hmm.
for many years, in terms of technology and AI nowadays, have been impacted communities all over, around the world. So how
Hmm.
are communities actually using AI today, if they use it at all?
No, I think, like there are really good examples when we see how communities are accessing AI. I would say mobile banking is a real classic example of how you see, a common man has really made it's so accessible on your mobile phone. And again, like telemedicine, how I would say revolutionary it has become, especially during the time of COVID. Even in emerged economies, or I would say evolved, or I would say advanced economies, have figured out the power of telemedicine during COVID times, the digital government services, how like in a country like India, how easy life has become for a common man with this. So there are a lot of, I would say, great success stories of I would say a real good use of AI. Again, as I said, with this climate change, imagine this small mobile notification, AI-enabled notification that gives that can help him design his strategy to do farming, is a fantastic approach of how AI is really impacting communities on ground. But for me, what is interesting is that the adoption often happens more informally and pragmatically. It's not strategically designed, like sometimes you just kind of become part of it without knowing of what it is. And you see young people, how are they using generative AI to learn, I would say, skills more faster?
Hmm.
How are small entrepreneurs really using AI for marketing, communication? So again, like a lot of stuff. I am working in India right now in kind of revolutionizing the waste management sector, especially by integrating the informal sector into the formal waste supply chain. You see how AI has kind of played a revolutionary enabler, I would say, to really help with all AI material recovery facilities, logistic optimization that directly impacts their livelihoods. So the challenge is that usage is growing faster than understanding. You have to understand it. It's just not only how you are using it, because that's when you are kind of enter the misuse phase, and that's what leads to the burst of most of these technological advancements. So again, like it's great to see the progress, but it's also important to be the conscious at the pace at which this progress is happening, because with this pace is the inclusion is also at the same pace. And if it creates more biases, and I always say that biases are the entry points for exclusion. And so we don't want to leave anyone behind in this journey. And to keep that digital literacy around AI is integral, and that's why I say it need to be made fundamental right for every human being if we have to live with AI, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, are there any examples where you perhaps seen or you are aware of where perhaps AI is being used in meaningful ways in vulnerable communities, low resource, or undeserved context?
Absolutely. I would say I'm just not seeing, but I'm myself right now working on this AI-enabled platform for informal waste workers to kind of use AI and the like advanced technology to tokenize waste. And how do you add more economic value to the waste and make the waste that you see lying on the roads more of economic output than just as a waste? And that's how you address the problem of the waste, by incentivizing the problem itself. So we are doing a phenomenal work, and we have created, I would say, one of the India's first climate co-op in Northeast India, in Assam. It's called Pride Co-op, and Pride stands for Prag Jyotishpur Initiative for Recycling and Development. And this is, I would say, a developmental approach, but more importantly, from a technological lens. How do you bring in these technologies that works best for, I would say, structurally, I would say, excluded communities like informal waste workers? That's one example. Again, coming from my previous exposure around the artisan sector,
Yeah.
how kind of AI has been able to create this understanding around quality, lead time, and has bridged the gap between the end user and the creator, is like a phenomenal success story. Like now, as I said, you might have seen some elements of that just sitting in a very, very remote rural village, creating the finest craft. You can actually now connect with your end consumer in any part of the world in real time. Like that's the real, I would say, transformative power of AI and technology. Again, everything around farmer producer organizations, you see how are they leveraging AI to kind of increase their yield, one, also to kind of diversify their risk, so that in farming, if you just farm only one particular kind of vegetable or any cereal, you are more prone to losses because of climatic realities that we live in. But with the technology, you know how to diversify your risk, based on the patterns of climate that are about to happen in your region. So again, a lot of great success stories, great examples, and I would say in Latin America, I was there recently, and I'm seeing how countries in Caribbean like Dominican Republic are becoming like the hotspot of innovation, and how are they leveraging AI in tourism? How are they leveraging AI in the craft sector, in the traditional, I would say, creative sectors, in music, in theaters. So again, like in vast, I would say, in last few months, from Brazil to Dominican to Mexico to India to Europe to Thailand, I've seen kind of the beauty of the diversity that is there. It's just that how do you make it more consciously focused, that you don't deviate from the real voices that are integrated when you design these solutions, rather than making these voices as test.
Yeah, I see. He was cutting off a little bit, but I get the whole idea. So yeah, it was a little bit of cut off. But yeah, I see the whole idea. How
Is
can
it good?
this? I think it's getting better, but yeah, I get the idea. Basically, like you were saying, that these places which have some like primary challenges, that are integrating AI in order to kind of develop their own projects, to empower themselves, and to make a difference in their own context. So I think the big question would be, Yash, what are the biggest challenges or barriers preventing communities from benefiting from AI?
Interesting. I think like it's the prime thing, as I said, is infrastructural inequality. If you don't have affordable internet, you don't have right devices, electricity, digital system, AI remains an abstract concept. Second, I think, as I said about education, it's capability inequality, because people really needs to have that digital confidence. They need to have digital access to be able to build that digital confidence. And third is the trust inequality, because again, community needs transparency and how their data is used, how it benefits them, or whether it is even fair for them or not. So I think trust inequality, capability inequality, and infrastructure inequality are the core barriers. But there are other deeper issues, because many AI systems are built far away from reality where they are served. Again, like the source and the host are different. So I think how do you really kind of focus on bridging this gap? And I think if you can include the community in the design, technology becomes really more empowering than extractive. Otherwise, it's
Hmm.
an extractive affair.
Like there is a lot of investment and development happening in AI, right? Globally. Do you think the current trends are actually helping close the gap? Or perhaps they're doing the opposite, widening it?
I would say right now, if we talk about investments happening and the trends and the gap widening, I think both things are happening simultaneously. It's not that it's only happening in like, I would say, more advanced economies. It is happening everywhere, I would say, like everywhere right now. So both are happening simultaneously, but AI has an enormous potential to democratize knowledge and productivity.
Hmm.
But again, we all know wealth, power sits and is very concentrated. So how do you diversify it, distribute it more, so that, like, the gap is not getting bigger and bigger? And if you see the historical trends in technological revolution, it has created opportunities, but only position for those who benefit from early, not in long term run on that. And I would say without intentional intervention, AI can definitely deepen economic inequality, geopolitical imbalance, and again, a new form of colonialism, which is digital colonialism.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point, man. I think, like currently there are certain economies who are shaping the future of AI. And I do believe there are some who are missing from that conversation. And then this is when we actually, what you mentioned that, like you need more infrastructure, more integration for those who do not want left behind, right? Because it seems to me like, okay, there are certain communities who didn't catch the industrial train, then they didn't catch the
Yeah.
technological train. And now it seems they wouldn't catch even the AI train. So there are definitely some regions or individuals in the civil society who are missing from that conversation. So, what role should governments, NGOs, and organizations play in making AI more accessible and equitable for
I would
society?
say again, like each player, or I would say each element has its own role, you know. And government's most important role is how do you create one enabling environment and ethical policy system. If we have that support from government and that investments on government around ethical policies and that enabling environment, I think we are really good with the policy side of it. But again, NGOs and civil society in this AI train are very, very, very critical because they can only bridge the gap between innovations and the reality that is lived. And that's when, again, I always say that Pyxera Global is so classically designed as an organization to play that catalytic role by building cross-sector partnerships because partnership models are very critical. No single sector can solve this digital inequality problem. And if you can really combine the power of community governance, technology, investments, workforce development, system thinking, you can really make a robust system. And that requires a very, very serious collaboration across sectors, across geographies that can make it relevant, that can make it relatable, and that can make it realistic, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, definitely there are some tensions and perhaps risks in developing such a technology like AI, right? And it seems to me there is a strong narrative that perhaps AI can democratize opportunities. So,
Mhm.
do you agree with that, or do you see risks in of reinforcing inequality? Because it could happen,
You
no?
know what? Yeah, you know what? Like what I've learned over the period of years is that it's very easy to say one is good and one is bad, or one is possible and one is not possible. If you really see it from the lens of appreciative inquiry, I think both are true. Because AI can definitely democratize access to knowledge at an unprecedented scale, but access to knowledge does not automatically translate into access to opportunity. We have to understand that. If AI primarily increasing productivity for those who are already privileged, inequality is widening by nature because there is
Yeah.
no representation. If AI replaces labor force without creating pathways for reskilling, definitely we'll see that inequality will widen up. So if AI problems of reflecting historical biases, inequality kind of gets automated. So what I want to focus is technology by design is neutral, but the systems are not. And
Okay.
initially also I told you about it's the system that is more important that defines the fate of it.
I actually like this point that you make because that's super important. Systems, aren't neutral. And actually they are sometimes designed to benefit, some, right?
Yeah.
Or others
Yep.
are designed
Yep.
to benefit the entire society. And I think it's very important to see distinction in between systems and technology, which aren't actually the same thing, you know? And this is what worries me, like about AI, whether or not it's being developed and distributed globally, right? Because it seems like it's
Mhm.
unequally distributed. So how do you see, like for instance, players as India, China, Taiwan, Singapore, even Malaysia in this game about AI development? Because if you think about it, like China has become a technological powerhouse, so has India, India too. And Taiwan has been always a technological hub. But it seems to me with this AI development, they are more and more relevant because they also facilitate the resources to create technology in terms
Mhm.
of energy,
Mhm.
and so on. Actually, one of the podcasts that we did, like we made the other day about AI is about the energy problem, right? So I was thinking, like, there are some areas in the world that energy hasn't been resolved, and now you need to add it. You need to add up this AI, as a layer. So I was thinking, you, as a professional who overview and walked the world, if you wish, how do you see these new players getting such a, let's say, importance in the world in terms of technology? India, which are the biggest population, 1.3 billion, and also China, just a little bit behind, but 1.2 billion. Like the last few years, I would say maybe 20 years, they've been investing like a lot in terms of education. You can see more educated society. I think the gap in between the rich and the poor in China and India, if I'm not mistaken, is slightly, shorter than before. Am I right?
Mhm.
Because they've been empowered through
It's
it.
kind of getting towards more, I would say, bilateral diplomatic evolution.
Okay, so how do you see like these new players coming out or coming into this field in the digital sphere?
Sure. Like firstly, I would really say like what worries me most is speed without inclusion. If we are kind of just like on a bullet train, forgetting the inclusion, I think that's when it becomes kind of dangerous and more unethical. And I also see we are moving really faster than our governance systems, ethical systems around it, workforce system around it, educational systems that can adapt this speed is really kind of worrying me. But again, I always say what is good for me is what I see other countries, other players coming in with their capabilities or with their understanding of how they have absorbed from global north, is another way of inclusion, because then you have the Indian perspective on AI. How are Indians kind of leveraging AI for impacting, 1.7 billion people and more to come? How has China really leveraged AI and has kind of created the dominance, which is again a point of worry for me, because we know that there are a small number of countries that holds the power of data, infrastructure, intelligence systems, and digital economies. That's when we really get worried about how just not AI becomes a technological revolution, but it becomes a power consolidation event. And in order to kind of not being trapped in that power consolidation event, you get more capabilities out of other players. And I think that's when you see how do you perceive how AI can really impact in different contexts. And the blend of all, as I said, there is no one right answer, but the blend of all gives you the real learning of how do you make AI relevant for sustainability of humanity, of love, compassion, which is not kind of a DNA, which is kind of part of AI. So how do you learn from AI that makes it it relevant in future, that there are things like love, there are things like compassion, there are things like, equity. That is, for me, is a good way to see different players coming in from different perspectives, and how they learn, and how do they absorb, and they implement in their context, in local context. So I think that's a beautiful way to see the role everyone has to play in this so-called AI revolution, that by God's grace and by power of human morality, it turns out to be more beneficial than dangerous.
Yeah. Let me go a little bit deep, no? I would say more like this kind of a spiritual conversation about technology and the role that it's gonna have, in presence among us, the civil society. Because I would say we are able to create good, but also we are able to create the bad. So we can be both create problems, but also being problem solvers. So would you say perhaps, this AI presence, would be able to manage populations, regions, or countries? So would you see in the future a technocracy where AI is gonna make decisions because it wouldn't be biased in a way, because it would, if it's created to be like neutral and, as you said before, systems, would you see like this kind of a scenario where AI is managing countries in a technocratic world or something like this?
Say I hope that does not happens in reality as the fundamental to our living, because I think that's when we will completely, you know, replace humanity with technology. And I still am a firm believer that the most powerful force on the world is humanity, is the ability of human beings to feel. And but the way we see increasingly, I would say, increasingly emergent trend of conflicts, yes, definitely, there is a big play of technology in that, and how it is leading that. We all are kind of witnessing that in different regions of the world, and how we see the global supply chains are disrupted. It is already happening. It's not that it's not happening, but I always say that there is place in totality, there is place for everything. So yes, there is place for this, but then this should not be the fundamental of existence. The fundamental of existence should always be love, the always be humanness, and I think that will take care of automatically these forces for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I was mentioning that because before we're having this profound conversation about being capable of doing good, right? But at the same time doing bad, and how these kind of opposite forces, like, they are contrived and also they live together. Yeah. You can have, the other day I was having a fantastic conversation with bionics. So basically they have integrated AI for prosthetics, right? you know, Even you born without limbs, or perhaps you lost some of your limbs during the war. But then, on the other hand, their AI is being used for war, especially nowadays. So the big question is how, we would be able as a society to transcend, these limits and, make AI for good rather than AI for something else.
See, I always see the world with both chaos, control, and consciousness. Like there is always this chaos, control, and consciousness that exist in simultaneous pattern. And I would say now, because we have seen COVID, now we have seen so many drastic impact of climate in our lives, in our businesses, in our existence. There are certain islands in Pacific that would not exist in next 10 years. So with all what we are seeing as the the human race, I am completely assured that there always will be an alternative to bring the power of good in anything, in everything. And when technology was kind of coming into our life through, say, Facebooks and Yahoos and Googles, we were worried about it. But the beauty of human brain is that we know how to adapt. We know how to evolve. So I think we will definitely adapt and evolve with the changing demand of the technology, but without losing humanity and without losing humility. And there will be a lot of new models, new leadership that we still have not seen that will come up, who would lead the change for the role for AI for good, or for the role of leadership or governance for good. But
Hmm.
we all have to kind of consciously experience, embrace, and evolve from this progress and this speed of progress. But not considering the term digital justice as like a charity. It is an strategy to ensure that people will have agency in the future digital economy. So if we don't see it from a charitable lens and we see it from a strategic lens, we will ensure that we will make it work more for good than bad.
Hmm. But I agree with you, man. Like a point that you make earlier on, and talking what we were just talking about. Like at the end of the day, nowadays, the creation of technology, it seems to be more spread out among countries. So I think we would be able to create our own AI space. Even communities could do that. So my question is, for organizations that genuinely want to use AI for impact, what should they do differently when
Mhm.
working with communities from your perspective?
Yep, yep. I think, like, to really keep it simple and I would say executable, I think first thing is that we should start with problems, not technology. What kind of problems we are trying to address that community has with technology. So
Hmm.
communities do not need AI for the sake of AI. They need real solutions. And I always said we adopt technology because we really need solutions in real time to improve our life in real context. So start with problems, not technology. Second is co-creation is critical to be relevant. So design with communities, not for them. And third one is invest in long-term capability building, because it's the game of capability. If you have the capability to deal with it, you can. And if you don't have it, you will have to lose the train. So the goal should not be on how do we become more dependent on technology providers, but how it should become more locally resilient, and the ownership should stand in the local communities. So those organizations will succeed with the ones that combines innovation and humility together.
Yeah, that's great, man. I really like how you put it in between, capability, co-creation, no? And this kind of ethical framework, which you mentioned before, which is very important, right? So what does responsible AI, when we talk about ethics, look like from the perspective of someone on the ground, right? Not someone in a lab or in a corporate setting.
I would say, I am a common man. I would say what responsible AI means for me. If I understand how that system will affect me, how my community will have agency,
Hmm.
is their foundation is biased, or their biases are being addressed in the design of the AI? How is my data treated? And most important, is the technology strengthening my dignity as a human being, or it is trying to replace me? I think for me, if I have fair understanding of these conditions, for me, it's a foundation of a responsible AI. And I would say from the ground up, responsible AI is not any kind of theoretical framework. That's why I say what I mean responsible AI for me. It is about pure human elements of fairness, trust, accessibility, and most important, accountability in daily life. If I am accountable, I am more responsible towards it. If I have somebody else is owning the accountability, then again, I'm a test bed for the consequences of AI in my life. So for me, these are really real life concepts around fairness, trust, accessibility, and accountability that forms towards more responsible AI. There is no, and I would say there is no real framework that you can say you will follow this framework. It's a responsible AI because there are alternatives to them as well. But if you kind of keep the human foundations intact, that's a good infrastructure for a responsible AI, if that makes sense.
100%. Actually, this kind of framework could be, translated into organizations, corporations, even the state. I mean, they seem like super simple, but there are five very important matters in order to be more responsible. 100%. So let's say, Yash, that you have the power to prioritize. So if you had to prioritize one thing to reduce the digital divide in the age of AI, what would it be?
It's very clear. AI literacy at scale. We need to make AI literacy as a fundamental right. That's it. You do it well, you prepare the future well.
Yeah. Yeah. Even for children? Or how would you do that, bro?
Everyone, I would say. When I say fundamental, it has to be for everyone. It cannot be consequential. It has to be fundamental because if you live, breathe, and play in an environment, you need to know the basics of environment. So we really need to find a way to not only democratize, but to make it as your fundamental right to understand what it means in a very, very simplistic terms, the way we know how to read and write, we need to have a very basic understanding of what it is for youth, for workers, educators, entrepreneurs, communities, public institutions, everyone.
Hmm.
Because what I feel is that the future digital divide would not simply between rich and poor countries. It'll be increasingly between those who can adopt alongside intelligent system and those who cannot. So adopter versus non-adopters is what would create the digital divide of futures. And if we bring in the concept of literacy at scale, we ensure that we have maximum population to be adopters versus non-adopters.
Yeah. So the last question, bro. If there is one idea you would like people to take away from this conversation of how should we understand about AI and inequality today, what would be?
I would say, you know what, AI is not just shaping the future of technology. It's shaping the future of how we live, how we work, how we coexist. It's
Hmm.
shaping the future of power, it's shaping the future of opportunity, and it's shaping the future of human inclusion. So the question is not whether AI will transform the society, it is already doing. I shared some examples. We all see some examples. But the most important thing is, will this transformation widen inequality or expand opportunity? And I will like to pause here and want our viewers to think on this question more, that will this transformation would create more inequality or it will create an canvas to expand opportunities. And I think that's all what it matters with this whole new AI generation.
Hmm.
And I would say that all the decisions should not always be made with technology alone, because intuitions are more powerful than logics. Logics are important, but intuitions combined with logic makes it more robust, more real, and more reliable. So I think that's my greatest thought that I can share as the closing note.
Thank you, Josh, man. It's been a fantastic conversation. I think, again, we learn a lot about this connection in between technology, society, you know, future, present, the consciousness of it, the ethics of it, and the human part of it, which I love it because, sometimes we dehumanized like technology. And I think, although it seems so, as you said before, technology is more than a tool, more than something to be used for. So thank you, bro, for your time. It's been fantastic to catch up again. And of course, we're going to meet again.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and again, a phenomenal conversation because I think both your questions and my responses, we try to make it more real than more technological or more framework or theoretical than how do you implement it as common layman. And I hope it brings some confidence, some energy to the viewers, and again, always love the feedback and how can we get better and how can we have more conversations that are easily translatable to action.
That's great, man. It's been fantastic.
Pleasure.
Cool.
Such a
So
fun.
thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.